In this video, I am going to be answering some common pre-med questions. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Nessim. I'm the founder of the Premed Consultants, where we help students get into medical school and help them every step of the process. Now, we have recently launched our Premed Tracker software, which shows you exactly what you need to do to complete your prereqs, get into medical school, track your clinical and shadowing hours. And also, one of the features is that we have a community where you can hop on and ask questions. And so these questions that I'm getting are right from our pre-med tracker. Some of them I've already answered in the tracker, but I'm going to go more in depth in this video. And if you want to grab an account yourself, you can click the link below. You'll be able to get a free account. So let's get into it. The first question states, I'm a first-year pre-med student. Is it better to work as a medical scribe or an EMT? Because I was considering working as an EMT next year. Also, I had a question about extracurriculars. I want to be a neurosurgeon and plan on shadowing one this summer. Is there any extracurricular that you would recommend? Okay, so that's a multi-part question, so we'll try to break it down. First, when it comes to medical scribe or EMT, I think these are both great experiences. Now, EMT may actually get you a lot more hands-on clinical experience. However, sometimes EMT is a big commitment. You have to get certified. Sometimes for medical scribing, you do too, but the EMT can be a lot. And so for students, when they're just starting out, you're going to need to get shadowing clinical throughout your years. But first, don't worry too much. Don't take on too much at once. You got to do well in your classes first. But when it comes down to your clinical experiences, you really can do anything. So if you find a position that is reasonable in terms of the hours that you're interested in and that you're able to get, I would go with that. I wouldn't worry too much if it's EMTing or scribing. Both are good options. With that said, I like EMT more for clinical. For scribing, it is a good position to have. A lot of students do it. However, you're not always working hands-on as much with the patients, but it's also not fully shadowing because you're working in the role of a scribe. However, with scribing, you're able to leverage that a lot of times to get shadowing. What I tell a lot of our students is if they work as a scribe, ask that physician if you can come in on an off day every once in a while and shadow them. So you're not in a work capacity, you're just following them around and paying more close attention to what they do on a day-to-day basis, and that can count for shadowing hours as well. So the second part of this question talks about that the student wants to be a neurosurgeon and that they plan on shadowing one this summer. That's awesome experience. Now, when you're just starting out, you don't need to know right away the exact specialty you want to go into. And over 50% of students that start medical school thinking they're going to go into one thing usually end up a different specialty. And so it's good to have interest early on, but you don't have to place too much emphasis on that as you're going through your pre-med years. Is there any other extracurricular activity that you would recommend? I think this student already is clearly your classic type A pre-med student, and they are already looking to get good experiences. Clinical, shadowing, that's a good place to start. When it comes to other extracurriculars, outside of that, of course, you're going to want to get some research as a pre-med student, but then honestly, doing something that you actually enjoy, even if that's outside of medicine. So for example, I did club soccer when I was a undergrad. I also joined a social fraternity in which I was the philanthropy chair of. And so you can do whatever your interest might be. Maybe you want to join a band or do something within music or dance. You don't need to only do pre-med extracurriculars. And honestly, you shouldn't only do pre-med extracurriculars because admissions committees want to see that you're a person beyond just medicine. And so sometimes you may connect with an interviewer, for example, on something totally unrelated to pre-med. Maybe it's both you have a passion for cooking and they notice that on your application. You never know. And also, it's just more enjoyable to not only do pre-med stuff throughout your 4 years of undergrad. Okay, the next question says, I'm a first-year pre-med student. I'm currently working as a student MA, which stands for medical assistant, at the Student Health Services in my university. Do not understand if I can consider it clinical experience as it is not an actual hospital. I am allowed to take vitals and blood pressure. So if you are working with patients in a clinical capacity, then it is considered clinical experience. It does not have to be at a hospital. So if you're taking vitals, that's definitely considered clinical experience. So this would be a great clinical experience. Now, what a lot of students do is they get these experiences early on, but then they forget about the experiences or any impactful moments. And that's why our pre-med tracker, if you actually go and click in, let me show you real quick. if I go to work and activities, you can add a work and activity and actually log and write about your experiences. And this looks exactly like what it's going to look on the real application services. And so we let you actually work on your apps essentially ahead of time as you're going throughout your pre-med years rather than last minute when you're trying to recall. So again, if you want to make an account, you can get a free account down below. There'll be a link. Just click that link and it'll take you to create a free account. All right, next question. I'm a first year pre-med student mapping out my schedule for my sophomore year. What classes would you recommend me taking during the fall? Parentheses, on top of OChem and psychology. Okay, let's think about this. So just finished your first year, so now you're going to be taking classes in the sophomore year. You're taking OChem and psychology. So if you're already taking OChem, that means you did Gen Chem 1 and 2 in your freshman year, which is good. A lot of students sometimes forget to take Gen Chem 1 or 2 in their freshman year, and that's not the end of the world, but then it's hard to get through all your prereqs without taking a gap year because if you haven't taken general chemistry in your first year and you're taking it in your second, then it's hard to take biochem in time for the MCAT, and just everything gets pushed back a little. With that said, I recommend to most students to take a gap year, and so you really don't want to rush the pre-med process anyway. So it's not the end of the world if you're a student watching this and you didn't take Gen Chem in your freshman year. Now, this student, it seems like they did. They're going to take OChem in their sophomore year. They're going to take psychology. I would take a biology class, and you don't need to take physics just yet. That would be a lot to take OChem, biology, and physics all in one semester. So honestly, I just think another upper level bio, and then whatever classes they probably have to take for their major would be a good plan for this student. Okay, someone says, and this is a very common question, what's the recommended amount of clinical volunteer and shadowing hours for someone who is an AB, parentheses, mostly B student compared to an A student? I'm just going to read you my response that I gave in the tracker. I would not think of it as the hours are different between those types of students. Either way, you want to get quality experience and hours. 50 extra hours won't, for example, make up the difference from a poor to a good GPA. I would try to get consistent clinical and shadowing experience you can talk about in your apps and interviews. However, if your GPA is low and you are graduating soon, you can always consider a post-bac program. So that last piece of information goes a little bit beyond the question that was asked, but if a student is very concerned about a low GPA, and some Bs on your app is totally fine, but if you're concerned about a low GPA, no real amount of clinical and shadowing hours, 100 versus 200 is going to make the difference. One of the things that's important to show to medical school admissions committees is that you can perform well academically and you're not at risk of failing out if they accept you into their program. So if you have a very low GPA or consistently low GPA and you've never really showed you can excel in these classes, this is when a special master's program or a post-bac program would be beneficial. And we have a video that talks about the differences between special masters and post-bac programs, so you can check that out if you're interested. Okay, this is a simple but good question. Is taking the MCAT in June too late? And the answer to this, if you're applying in that same cycle for June, is actually no. I personally like most of our students if they're taking a spring test date and they're applying in that same cycle. So for example, as I'm recording this video, it is May of 2024 and apps actually just opened because it's the end of May. And so for students that are going to be applying this upcoming cycle, the 2024-2025 cycle, I really want most of them to have taken an April or May test date so that their score is coming back. If they take an April date, it's coming back in May. They probably already know their score. If they take a May test date, it's going to come back in June, and so you're still very early in the cycle. If you take a June test date, your score is going to come back in July. It's not the end of the world. You're not really too late in the cycle. And also, a lot of students don't know that you can actually submit your applications, put in all your grades, and start the verification process, which is when AMCAS or COMAS are basically matching up your transcript with the grades that you input into the system to make sure that it matches up. You could start that process even if you didn't take the MCAT or if you're still waiting for your MCAT score, and then the MCAT score can be updated into your application system. For AMCAS, it's automatically updated. And so if you take a June test date, by the time schools start to send out secondaries and review those secondaries, you're really not too late in the cycle. Mid to late June is generally the latest. Can you get in if you take a July or August MCAT test date? You definitely can. I don't recommend this to students. If you're not going to be taking an MCAT until August of that year and you think you're applying in that cycle, you may be better off pushing to the next application cycle. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule, and students do get in taking late MCATs and applying late, but in general, the earlier you apply, the better your chances of getting into medical school are, because there is more open spots to give interviews early on in the process. And also, it also just shows that you're on time, you're prompt. If you, for example, have not the best GPA, and then you're a student that's shown that you're taking an MCAT late in the cycle, then your application goes in late, it's not overall going to be the best look. And so if that's the case, I wouldn't rush it. I would just wait till the next cycle. But June specifically, it's still not too late, even though apps are open, so a lot of students freak out. It's not too late. Although if you were, let's say, working with us and we were one of our students for years and we had time to plan, we would make sure that you're taking the MCAT earlier so that you have time to get your score back, also have the proper time to prep for the MCAT, which is another good point that it brings up. It's not worth rushing to take the MCAT to get it in earlier if you're not going to have enough time and you're not scoring where you need to be, because then you're just going to have a bad score in your application. And so there's always a balance to taking the MCAT early enough for that cycle, but not too early that you're rushing through your prep. So if you're not getting near the score you want to be at, which is a reasonable score, not if your target score is a perfect score on the MCAT and you're scoring 514, it's still okay to take the MCAT. But if, let's say, your target score is a 512 and you're not even breaking 505s in your practice, it may be worth continuing to study and pushing off the MCAT and even pushing off an application cycle. It's not the end of the world if that's the case. All right, so we're going to end the video there. I thought those were some great questions, and hopefully the information I was able to provide was helpful. If you have other questions you want answered in a following video, you can leave it in the comments below, or even better, sign up for a free Premed Tracker account. Go into our free community and write your questions. Not only will I answer it there, but I may also feature it in a YouTube video.